David had been living alone in his small apartment for almost 4 months now. The divorce papers were signed. The lawyers had stopped calling, and life had settled into a quiet routine. His evenings were predictable. Work on the laptop, order food from the same 3 restaurants, and watch whatever was trending on streaming platforms. Tonight felt no different as rain drummed against his windows. The apartment still felt too big and too empty at the same time. He had kept most of the furniture from his previous life, but somehow it all looked different now. The couch where he used to sit with his ex-wife now held only him and a pile of work documents. The dining table had become his office desk, since he rarely ate proper meals there anymore. It was almost 9 in the evening when someone knocked on his door. David looked up from his laptop surprised. He wasn't expecting anyone. His friends usually called before dropping by, and his family lived in another state. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. When he opened the door, his breath caught in his throat. Standing there, completely soaked from the rain, was Lisa. She had been his closest friend in college, someone who understood him better than most people ever had. But she had moved across the country 2 years ago for her career, and they had slowly lost touch despite promising to stay in contact. The woman standing in his doorway was not the same person he remembered from their college days. Lisa had always been smart and talented, but there was something different about her now. She stood straighter. Her eyes held a confidence he had never seen before. Even soaked from the rain, she carried herself with a presence that made the hallway seem smaller. "Hi, David," she said, her voice steady despite the weather. "I know this is sudden, but I was hoping we could talk." David stood there for a moment, still processing her unexpected appearance. Lisa had a small overnight bag slung over her shoulder, and looked like she had traveled a long way. Her hair was darker than he remembered, and she had a small scar above her left eyebrow that hadn't been there in college. "Lisa, what are you doing here? Come in, you're soaked," he said, stepping aside to let her enter. She walked into his apartment with the same confidence she had shown at the door. David noticed how she took in the space with quick, observant glances. Her job as an architect had trained her to read spaces, and he wondered what she was thinking about his current living situation. "I flew in for a work conference downtown," she explained, setting her bag by the door. "But if I'm being honest, that's not the real reason I'm here." David felt his heart speed up slightly. There was something in her tone that suggested this visit was about more than just catching up with an old friend. He grabbed a clean towel from the bathroom and handed it to her. "Let me make some coffee," he offered, grateful for something to do with his hands. "You look like you could use something warm." As he moved around his small kitchen, David tried to make sense of what was happening. Lisa had always been the type to plan everything carefully. She didn't make impulsive decisions or show up unannounced. The fact that she was here now, in his apartment, meant something significant had changed in her life. "Your place is nice," she said, drying her hair with the towel. "It suits you better than that big house you used to talk about wanting." David paused while measuring coffee grounds. She was right. During college, he had always talked about wanting a large house with a big backyard and multiple bedrooms. The life he had actually built and then lost felt nothing like those old dreams. "Things change," he said simply, starting the coffee maker. Lisa walked over to the window and looked out at the rain. "They do, sometimes in ways we never expect." There was something in her voice that made David look at her more carefully. She seemed different in a way that went beyond just growing older. There was a strength about her that reminded him why he had always admired her in college, but amplified, somehow. "How long has it been since we last talked?" she asked, turning back to face him. "Too long," David replied honestly. "Maybe 8 months. That phone call when you got promoted." 9 months, she corrected. It was 9 months ago. The fact that she remembered exactly made him realize this visit was definitely not random. Lisa had always been precise about details, but keeping track of their last conversation to the month suggested she had been thinking about it more than he had realized. The coffee maker finished brewing, filling the quiet apartment with its familiar aroma. David poured 2 mugs and handed one to Lisa. Their fingers brushed briefly when she took the cup, and he felt a small jolt of recognition, Some things apparently never changed. "So what's the real reason you're here?" he asked gently. Lisa took a sip of her coffee and studied his face. "I heard about your divorce. I wanted to make sure you were okay, but also—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I realized there were things I never said when I had the chance." David felt the air in the room shift. Whatever Lisa had come here to say, he had the feeling it was going to change everything about this quiet evening. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside his small apartment, something important was about to begin. They sat on opposite ends of David's couch, coffee cups warming their hands as the rain continued outside. Lisa had changed into one of his old college sweatshirts after her wet clothes became too uncomfortable. Seeing her in his clothes brought back memories he had buried deep. "Tell me about the conference," David said, trying to ease into whatever conversation was coming. He could sense Lisa building up to something important, but he didn't want to rush her. Lisa smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's for sustainable architecture. 3 days of presentations about building greener cities. Interesting stuff, but honestly, I've been distracted the whole time." "Distracted by what?" She set down her coffee cup and looked directly at him. "By the fact that I was only 2 hours away from you and kept finding excuses not to call." David felt his stomach flip. "What kind of excuses?" "The usual ones. You're probably busy. It's been too long. Things are different now. We both have our own lives." Lisa ran her hand through her still damp hair. "But then yesterday I was sitting in this presentation about taking risks in design, and the speaker said something that stuck with me." "What did they say?" "That the biggest regret most people have isn't the chances they took that didn't work out. It's the chances they never took at all." David nodded slowly. He understood that feeling all too well. His marriage had ended partly because both he and his ex-wife had stopped taking chances with each other. They had settled into safe routines that felt comfortable but weren't really living. "So you decided to take a chance by coming here?" "Something like that." Lisa pulled her legs up under herself on the couch. "But first, I need to tell you some things. About why I really moved away and about what's been happening in my life." David waited, giving her the space to continue at her own pace. This was how Lisa had always been. She needed time to organize her thoughts before sharing something important. "Remember when I got that job offer in Seattle? The one with the big architecture firm?" "Of course. You were so excited about it." Lisa shook her head. "I wasn't excited. I was running away." "From what?" "From you, from us, from whatever was happening between us that last semester." David's coffee cup suddenly felt too heavy in his hands. He had wondered about this for years, but had never been brave enough to ask directly. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "Yes, you do." Lisa's voice was gentle but firm. "We both felt it. That night at graduation party when we almost—" She trailed off, but they both knew what she was referring to. David remembered that night perfectly. They had been talking alone on the balcony while the party continued inside. The conversation had gotten deep and personal, the way it always did with Lisa. At some point they had moved closer together. The almost kiss had felt inevitable until their friends had burst through the door, breaking the moment. "I thought about that night for months afterward," Lisa continued. "But you started dating someone else right after graduation, and I figured I had missed my chance." "Wait," David said, sitting forward. "You're the reason I started dating someone else. You became so distant after that night, I thought you regretted what almost happened." They stared at each other across the couch, both realizing how badly they had misread the situation years ago. "I was scared," Lisa admitted. "You were my best friend. I didn't want to ruin that by trying to make it something more and failing." "So you took the job in Seattle to avoid dealing with it?" "Partly, yes, but also because I thought it would help me get over whatever I was feeling for you." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That didn't work out like I planned." David set down his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. "What do you mean?" "I mean that every relationship I've had since college I've compared to what we had. The friendship, the connection. The way you understood me without me having to explain everything. Lisa's voice grew quieter. I got engaged last year to a really good guy. Someone who loved me and wanted to build a life together. What happened? I realized I was settling. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because I was trying to force something that didn't feel natural. We could have been happy, I think, but it would have been the safe kind of happy. The kind where you don't risk getting hurt, but you also don't risk getting everything you actually want. David felt like the room was spinning slightly. So you broke up? 3 months ago. I gave back the ring, helped him move his stuff out, and sat alone in my apartment trying to figure out what I actually wanted from life. Lisa pulled the sweatshirt tighter around herself. That's when I realized I had been running from the wrong thing. I thought I was protecting our friendship by keeping my distance, but I was actually just being a coward. Lisa, let me finish. Please, I need to say this. She took a deep breath. I heard about your divorce through mutual friends. I wanted to call you so many times, but I kept talking myself out of it. What would I say? Sorry your marriage didn't work out, but by the way, I've been in love with you since college? The words hung in the air between them. David felt his heart pounding so hard he was sure Lisa could hear it from across the couch. You've been in love with me since college? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lisa nodded, her cheeks flushing pink. I know it sounds crazy. We haven't even talked regularly in 2 years, but David, some feelings don't just go away because you ignore them. Some feelings get stronger when you try to bury them. David stared at her, trying to process everything she had just told him. The rain outside seemed to be getting heavier, creating a cocoon of sound around his small apartment. He realized that this conversation was the most honest one he had had with anyone in years, maybe ever. I need to tell you something too, he said finally. David took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would change everything between them one way or another. My marriage ended because I could never stop thinking about you, he said, the words coming out in a rush. Not in an obvious way. I wasn't calling your name or anything like that, but there was always this feeling that something was missing, some connection I had experienced before but couldn't find again. Lisa's eyes widened, but she stayed quiet, letting him continue. My ex-wife was a good person. We had similar interests, similar goals. On paper, we were perfect for each other. But we never had what you and I had. That easy way of talking about anything, the way you could make me laugh when I was stressed about exams, the way you actually listened when I talked about my dreams. David, I used to lie awake at night, sometimes wondering what would have happened if I had been braver that night at the graduation party. If I had just ignored our friends and kissed you anyway. He ran his hands through his hair. I felt so guilty about it. Here I was, married to someone else, but still thinking about a woman I hadn't even kept in regular contact with. They sat, in silence for a moment, both processing the weight of what they had just shared. The apartment felt smaller somehow, charged with years of unspoken feelings finally being brought into the light. Lisa stood up from the couch suddenly, startling David. She walked to the window again, but this time she wasn't looking out at the rain. She was staring at her own reflection in the glass. I didn't come here just to talk, she said, her back still turned to him. What do you mean? She turned around, and David saw a determination in her expression that took his breath away. This wasn't the uncertain college girl he remembered, or even the successful but cautious woman who had walked through his door an hour ago. This was someone who had made a decision and was ready to act on it. I mean, I didn't fly across the country just to tell you how I've been feeling all these years and then go back to my hotel room. Lisa's voice was steady, but David could see her hands trembling slightly. I'm 32 years old, David. I'm tired of playing it safe. I'm tired of wondering what if about the most important thing in my life. David stood up as well, his heart racing. Lisa, what are you saying? I'm saying that I love you. Not the memory of you. Not some idealized version of our college friendship. I love who you are now, sitting in this apartment, dealing with your own life changes and still being the same person who understood me better than anyone else ever has. She took a step toward him, then another. I'm saying that I came here Because I finally have the courage to stop running away from what I want. David felt like the floor was shifting beneath his feet. Everything about this evening had been unexpected, but this moment felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, not because he doubted her feelings, but because he needed to know she had thought this through. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Lisa was close enough now that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "I spent 2 years trying to convince myself that what I felt for you was just nostalgia. I dated other people, built a successful career, tried to create a life that didn't have this giant question mark in the middle of it. And none of it worked. Because the question wasn't whether I could build a life without you. The question was whether I was brave enough to find out what our life together could look like." David reached out and touched her hand. Her skin was warm despite the cold rain she had walked through earlier. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Good," Lisa said, squeezing his hand. "I'm scared too. But I'm more scared of leaving here tomorrow and spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had been honest with you tonight." She stepped even closer, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of her perfume mixed with the rain and the borrowed sweatshirt. "David, I need you to know something. This isn't some impulsive decision. I've been thinking about this for months. I ended my engagement partly because I realized I was trying to force something that could never compare to what we had. I took a leave of absence from work so I could figure out what I really wanted from life." "What did you decide?" "I decided that life is too short to keep avoiding the one person who has always felt like home to me." Lisa's free hand reached up to touch his cheek. "I decided that some risks are worth taking even if they might not work out." David felt something shift inside his chest, like a door he had kept carefully locked was finally opening. "What if we mess this up? What if we try and it ruins everything we had?" "Then at least we'll know," Lisa said simply. "At least we won't spend the rest of our lives wondering." The rain outside had turned into a steady downpour, creating a wall of sound that made the apartment feel even more isolated from the rest of the world. David looked into Lisa's eyes and saw his own hopes and fears reflected back at him. "I've missed you," he said quietly. "Not just the friendship we had, but you. The way you think, the way you challenge me, the way you make me want to be better than I am. I've missed you too. So what happens now?" Lisa smiled, and this time it reached her eyes completely. "Now we stop wasting time being scared of what we might lose and start focusing on what we might gain." She moved closer still, until there was barely any space left between them. "Now we find out what happens when two people who have been running in opposite directions finally decide to run toward each other instead." David felt his last walls of resistance crumble. This was Lisa, his best friend, the woman he had never stopped thinking about, standing in his apartment and offering him everything he had been too afraid to hope for. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David nodded, not trusting his voice to work properly. Then, slowly, carefully, he leaned down and kissed her. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like years of questions were finally being answered. When they pulled apart, David and Lisa looked at each other with a mixture of amazement and relief. The thing they had both been wondering about for so long had finally happened, and it felt completely natural. "That was," David started, then stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. "Long overdue," Lisa completed, smiling softly. They stood there for a moment, still close enough to touch, both trying to process what had just changed between them. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, but inside the apartment, everything felt different now. "I can't believe we waited this long," David said, shaking his head. "We weren't ready before," Lisa replied. "I wasn't ready. I needed to grow up, make my own mistakes, figure out who I was outside of college and outside of what other people expected from me." David nodded, understanding what she meant. His failed marriage had taught him things about himself that he couldn't have learned any other way. The loneliness and self-reflection that followed had helped him become more honest about what he actually wanted from life. "Do you want to sit back down?" he asked. We should probably talk about what this means. Lisa smiled and took his hand, leading him back to the couch. This time, instead of sitting on opposite ends, she sat close, beside him. The simple change in distance felt significant. "What do you want it to mean?" she asked. David thought carefully before answering. "I want it to mean that we stop pretending we're just old friends who happen to run into each other. I want it to mean that we give this a real chance, whatever this turns out to be. I want that too. But David, I need you to know that I'm not looking for something casual. I didn't come here for one night of closure or to satisfy curiosity about what might have been." "What are you looking for?" Lisa turned to face him fully. "I'm looking for a partner. Someone who wants to build something real together. Someone who's ready to be completely honest even when it's difficult." David felt a warmth spreading through his chest. "That's exactly what I want too. I'm done with relationships where we're both just going through the motions. I want someone who challenges me, who makes me think differently, who I can't wait to talk to at the end of a long day, even if that means making some big changes. I live across the country, David. My work is there, my life is there. My life is here, but honestly, what kind of life is it? I work too much, I don't have many close friends anymore, and I spend most evenings alone in this apartment." David gestured around the room. "If you're willing to figure it out together, then so am I." Lisa's expression softened. "You'd really consider moving?" "I'd consider anything if it meant we could actually try this. I've spent 2 years wondering if I made the right choice in my marriage, wondering if I was just settling because it seemed like what I was supposed to do. I'm not making that mistake again." They talked for hours as the storm continued outside. Lisa told him about her work, the projects she was passionate about, the clients who drove her crazy, and the small apartment she had decorated exactly the way she wanted. David shared stories about his job, the divorce process, and the therapy sessions that had helped him understand his own patterns better. What struck both of them was how easy the conversation felt. Despite the years apart, despite the major life changes they had both experienced, they still had that natural rhythm of communication they had always shared. They could disagree about something and discuss it without anyone getting defensive. They could share embarrassing stories and laugh together without judgment. "I forgot how much I missed this," Lisa said around midnight, curled up against David's side on the couch. "What?" "Talking to someone who actually listens, really listens, not just waiting for their turn to speak." David ran his fingers through her hair, marveling at how right this felt. "I missed having someone who gets my sense of humor. My ex-wife always said I was too sarcastic." "You're not too sarcastic. Other people just don't appreciate good wit when they hear it." They talked about their families, their dreams, their fears about getting older. Lisa shared her goal of starting her own sustainable architecture firm. David talked about his idea of writing a book someday, something he had never mentioned to anyone else. "What would you write about?" Lisa asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe about how people settle for lives that look good on paper instead of lives that actually make them happy." "That sounds like something worth writing." As the night went on, they both realized this wasn't just about rekindling an old attraction. They were different people than they had been in college, but somehow they were even more compatible now. The experiences that had shaped them during their time apart had made them better partners for each other. "Lisa," David said as the clock approached 1 in the morning. "Yeah? I want you to stay. Not just tonight, but really stay. I want us to figure out how to make this work." Lisa lifted her head to look at him. "Are you sure? Because once we really commit to this, there's no going back to being just friends. If this doesn't work out, we lose everything we had. I'd rather lose everything trying than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have had." Lisa smiled and kissed him again, this time with more certainty and less hesitation. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Okay," she said simply. "Let's do this." Outside, the storm was finally beginning to calm, but inside, David's apartment, a new chapter was just beginning. The first thing David noticed when he woke up was the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, he was confused. He never set his coffee maker on a timer, and he always had to drag himself out of bed to start his morning routine. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back, and he smiled before he even opened his eyes. Lisa was here. It hadn't been a dream. He found her in his small kitchen, wearing his college sweatshirt and a pair of his shorts that were comically too big for her. She had found his coffee supplies and was making breakfast with whatever she could find in his poorly stocked refrigerator. "Good morning," he said, leaning against the doorway and watching her work. "Good morning yourself," she replied, turning to smile at him. "I hope you don't mind. I'm not great at sleeping in unfamiliar places, so I got up early and thought I'd make myself useful." "I definitely don't mind. It's been a long time since I woke up to someone else making coffee." Lisa handed him a mug and gestured toward the small dining table where she had set out plates. "I found some eggs and bread. Nothing fancy, but it's better than whatever you usually eat for breakfast." "How do you know what I usually eat for breakfast?" "Because I know you, and I'm guessing it's either nothing or something you can eat." While checking emails, David laughed, realizing she was completely right. "Okay, you got me. But that's going to change now." "Is it? Having you here makes me want to do things differently. Better." They sat down to eat, and David found himself studying Lisa's face in the morning light. She looked relaxed in a way he hadn't seen the night before. The nervous energy that had carried her to his door was gone, replaced by something that looked like contentment. "So what happens now?" David asked, echoing the question from the night before. "Well, first I have to finish my conference. I have 2 more days of presentations." Lisa took a sip of her coffee. "But after that, we need to have some practical conversations." About? About how 2 people who live 3,000 miles apart make a relationship work. About who moves where and when and what that looks like for our careers? David nodded. These were the kinds of details that needed to be worked out, but somehow they didn't feel overwhelming the way they might have with someone else. With Lisa, he felt confident they could figure it out together. "I've been thinking about that," he said. "My job can mostly be done remotely. I'd need to go into the office maybe once a month, but the rest I can do from anywhere with good internet." "Really? You never mentioned that was an option." "I never had a reason to want to work remotely before. Now I do." Lisa reached across the table and took his hand. "David, I don't want you to make huge life changes just for me. What if this doesn't work out the way we hope it will? Then at least I'll have tried something different." "Lisa, I've been stuck in the same routine for months, the same job, the same apartment, the same 3 restaurants for takeout. Moving somewhere new, starting fresh, that actually sounds exciting. What about your friends here, your family?" "My family lives in another state anyway. As for friends," David paused, realizing how isolated he had become. "Honestly, I don't have as many close friends here as I probably should. Most of my social life revolved around being married, and when that ended, I lost touch with a lot of people." Lisa squeezed his hand. "I don't want to be the only person in your life. That's too much pressure." "You won't be. But you'll be the most important person, and that's exactly how I want it." After breakfast, Lisa had to leave for her conference, but they made plans for her to come back that evening. David spent the day in a much better mood than he had experienced in months. His co-workers commented on how different he seemed, and he found himself actually looking forward to the end of the workday for the first time in recent memory. When Lisa returned that evening, she had news. "I talked to my boss today," she said, settling onto the couch beside him. "I told her I was considering relocating and asked about the possibility of opening a satellite office here." "What did she say?" "She said they'd been thinking about expanding into this market anyway, and if I was willing to head up the new location, they'd support it." David felt his heart skip. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. It would take some time to set up, maybe 6 months, but it's doable." Lisa grinned. "Of course, I told her I needed to discuss it with someone first." "And what did you decide in that discussion?" "I decided that I'm tired of being practical about everything. I'm 32 years old, I have money saved, I have skills that are in demand, and I have the opportunity to build something with the person I care about most. Lisa moved closer to him on the couch. I decided that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is follow your heart. 6 months later, Lisa's company opened its new branch office in David City. She found an apartment 15 minutes from his place, close enough to see each other every day but far enough apart that they both maintained some independence as they figured out their new relationship. A year after that night in the rain, David proposed to Lisa in the same coffee shop where they used to study during college. She said yes before he finished asking the question. Their friends from college weren't surprised by the engagement announcement. Many of them said they had been waiting for David and Lisa to figure it out for years. At their wedding, Lisa's maid of honor gave a speech about the importance of taking risks for love, and David's best man joked about how long it had taken them to stop being stubborn about their feelings. During their first dance, Lisa whispered in David's ear, "I'm glad I was brave enough to knock on your door that night." "I'm glad you were brave enough for both of us," David replied. Looking back, Lisa often thought about the confidence it had taken to show up at David's apartment that rainy night. It had been one of the scariest things she had ever done, but it had also been the decision that changed everything. Sometimes the biggest risk was not taking one at all. David kept the coffee mug Lisa had used that first morning. It sat on his desk at their new shared home office, a reminder of the morning he woke up and realized his life had completely changed for the better. Some storms, he learned, brought exactly what you needed, even if you didn't know you needed it at the time.